I smoothed the navy blue fabric of my dress, the one I'd spent 3 months searching for, knowing the chair waiting for me was by the kitchen, a calculated insult worth $93,000 of my silent sacrifice. "Mrs. Cross, if you would please follow me to your seat." The wedding planner's voice, a saccharine blend of fake politeness and professional disdain, cut through the glittering noise of the grand ballroom. She clutched her clipboard against her chest like a shield, her face a mask of practiced neutrality. I was 67 years old, a retired literature professor from the low country of South Carolina, yet I felt the weight of my years and the humiliation of the moment pressing down on me with the force of an unseen hand. I followed her through. The vast echoing reception hall, the air thick with the scent of lilies and old money, crystal chandeliers, each one the size of my first car, sparked overhead, casting diamond-like reflections across the faces of 400 guests I mostly didn't recognize. This was Serafina's world, a meticulously curated display of Washington, D.C. royalty, political influence, and dizzying wealth. Across the room, my son Gabriel stood tall and imposing in his bespoke tuxedo. His arm was wrapped possessively around Serafina's impossibly slender waist as they greeted a line of sterling family friends. He hadn't looked my way once since the ceremony concluded. My handsome son, the talented surgeon, was utterly consumed by his new life, his new bride, and his frantic need to belong to this new social echelon. The planner's heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, a relentless metronome of social hierarchy. We walked past table after table of important people, past the glistening dance floor awaiting its first use, past the string quartet playing a tune I couldn't place. With every step, the knot in my stomach tightened, a hard, cold core of dread. Finally, she stopped. The spot was small, round, and strategically tucked away. It was partially hidden behind a massive, aggressive floral arrangement, a wall of white roses and green foliage, and, most tellingly, positioned directly beside the swinging doors that led straight into the catering kitchen. "Here we are," the planner announced, her smile brittle but fixed. I stared at the table, my breath catching in my throat. It was set for 5 guests. A place card, handwritten in an elegant, looping script that somehow felt mocking, read, "Lillian Cross." The other cards bore names I didn't recognize, names that underscored my deliberate exile. Mr. Reyes, wedding photographer; Ms. Chen, Serafina's former college roommate; Dr. Singh, a hospital colleague; and Mrs. Wallace, Gabriel's former neighbor from his first, far less glamorous apartment. The kitchen doors beside me swung inward. A waiter rushed past with a tray of used glasses, and the heat, the noise, and the chaotic scent of cooking oil and disinfectant momentarily washed over me. Another waiter followed, nearly bumping my chair as the doors swung shut again with a sharp clatter. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Cross?" the planner asked, her voice losing its honeyed edge, her eyes cooling to a challenging frost. "This is by the kitchen," I managed to say, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. "Yes. We had to make some last-minute adjustments to accommodate the ambassador's security detail and the Sterling family's extended seating requirements. I'm sure a pragmatic woman like yourself understands the complexities of an event of this magnitude." She glanced pointedly at a platinum watch I knew cost more than my annual salary. "Excuse me, I must check on the cake presentation." She pivoted and disappeared into the sea of glittering guests, leaving me alone at the empty, banished table. I sank into the velvet chair, feeling the weight of my 67 years pressing down on me. Across the vast hall, the head table gleamed. Gabriel and Serafina sat flanked by Senator Sterling and his wife Camilla, D.C. royalty, whose carefully orchestrated display of social hierarchy radiated outward through the room. My table, the kitchen table, was literally as far from the center as possible while still technically being in the same room. It was not an oversight. It was a message. "Just 3 days ago," Gabriel had called, his voice tight with manufactured embarrassment, asking for my credit card information for a small final wedding expense. That small expense turned out to be $93,000 for their 3-week honeymoon in the Seychelles, a trip he confessed he felt pressured to book to impress the Sterling family. I'd transferred the money immediately. This $93,000 contribution was piled atop the $156,000 I had already contributed to this wedding. Funds spent on the vintage champagne, the Parisian photographer, and the custom-made bridal gown, all without the Sterlings' knowledge. They believed their precious daughter was marrying a self-made, successful surgeon. A waiter appeared, accidentally knocking my chair again as the doors swung open. "Sorry, ma'am," he muttered, rushing back into the chaos. I watched as Serafina leaned in to whisper something to Gabriel, her diamond earrings flashing in the crystal light. She glanced in my direction, her red lips curling into what might have been a smile, but registered to my wounded heart as a definitive, chilling smirk. Gabriel never looked up. The photographer, apparently my assigned table mate, arrived first. "I'll be in and out," he explained politely, setting down a camera bag filled with expensive equipment. "Hope you don't mind the traffic." He vanished before I could respond. Slowly, my other table mates arrived. Mrs. Wallace, the kindly former neighbor, looking utterly bewildered. "Aren't you Gabriel's mother?" she asked, genuinely perplexed. "Why are you sitting all the way back here?" I didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound like self-pity. As the evening progressed, the kitchen doors maintained their metronomic swinging, servers rushed past with increasing urgency, and the constant clatter of dishes and the harsh barked orders of the chef became the unwelcome soundtrack to my miserable meal. When Gabriel and Serafina took to the dance floor for their first dance, a song I'd never heard, I watched my son's face, searching for the boy I had raised. I saw the 5-year-old, gap-toothed and determined, tying his shoes for the first time. I saw the 12-year-old, proudly clutching his science fair ribbon. I saw the 18-year-old, tearfully hugging me goodbye before college. And I saw the 26-year-old, accepting his medical school diploma, his eyes scanning the crowd desperately for my face. When exactly had he stopped seeing me? The answer came in a brutal flash of memory. The first time he brought Serafina home to South Carolina. The way she had looked at my historic, beloved house with thinly veiled disdain, dismissing it as charming in that D.C. way that meant utterly worthless. The way she had openly questioned Gabriel within my hearing about why he had settled for a small-town practice when he could be making real money in a major city. As I watched them dance now, crystal, glasses tinkling from the surrounding tables of importance, the truth hit me with crushing clarity. The kitchen table was not a mistake. It was the message I had paid $249,000 to receive. In Serafina's wedding, in Serafina's world, in the life my son had chosen, I belonged with the help, out of sight, convenient only for what I could provide. I took a shaky breath, the humid kitchen air catching in my throat. What would happen, I wondered, as the doors swung open one last time, if I simply stopped providing it? The reception dragged on, feeling longer and heavier than a Texas summer. From my kitchen table exile, I watched Senator Sterling, Serafina's father, deliver a toast about the creation of a new American political dynasty. A speech so arrogant and tone-deaf that it made several guests shift uncomfortably in their Chiavari chairs. He spoke of Gabriel as though appraising a thoroughbred, praising his excellent breeding potential and fine professional credentials, a worthy addition to the Sterling lineage. Not once did he mention me, the woman who had worked 2 jobs after my husband Theodore's heart attack when Gabriel was 11, the woman who had preserved his college fund by eating nothing but ramen noodles for a solid year, the woman who had literally read medical textbooks alongside him at our actual kitchen table back home to help him study for his exams. "Are you all right, dear?" Mrs. Wallace patted my hand kindly. "You've hardly touched your salmon," I forced a smile, just taking it all in. What I was truly taking in was the gradual, painful revelation that my son had become a stranger. Even from across the immense room, I could see how seamlessly he mirrored Serafina's mannerisms now. The dismissive, quick hand wave to servers. The practiced, brittle laugh that never quite reached his eyes. The way he constantly scanned the room, perpetually searching for people he deemed more important to acknowledge. Dr. Singh, the hospital colleague assigned to my table, returned from the bar with his second scotch. "Quite the production, isn't it?" he said, loosening his bow tie. "Nothing like Gabriel's first wedding," I snapped to attention. "You were at his wedding to Rachel?" "Of course. Small garden ceremony. Just 30 guests. Gabriel grilled the burgers afterward. Said it was a family tradition." My throat tightened. A painful constriction. It was indeed our tradition. My late husband, Theodore, had grilled for every family milestone, claiming no celebration was complete without the smell of charcoal. After Rachel had left Gabriel for her yoga instructor, my son had changed, throwing himself into his practice, moving to a showier apartment, beginning to appear in society pages. Then came Serafina with her old money and even older pretensions. "I need some air," I murmured, rising from the table. Outside, the terrace was blessedly empty. The bay stretched dark and infinite before me, and the cool September breeze carried the scent of roses and salt water, momentarily washing away the pervasive kitchen smells that had clung to my dress and hair. "Mother?" Gabriel's voice startled me. I turned to face my son, so handsome in his tuxedo, yet so eerily polished. "Have you?" I asked, meeting his gaze evenly. "I've been rather hard to miss at the kitchen table. A flash of something. Was it guilt? Or perhaps just simple irritation?" Crossed his perfectly smooth face. The seating arrangements were Serafina's department. "I'm sure it wasn't intentional. Like not inviting any of my friends was unintentional? Like scheduling the rehearsal dinner during my book club's annual awards ceremony was unintentional?" I countered, my voice low and steady. Gabriel's jaw tightened, a familiar defensive reaction. "You're making a scene." "There's no one here to witness it," I said, gesturing to the empty terrace. "Much like there's no one at this entire wedding who remembers you as a child, or cared for you when you had chicken pox, or knows that you still sleep with your socks on, even in summer. Mother, please. Today is supposed to be perfect. Yes, I know." I smoothed my dress again, a nervous habit from childhood. "Congratulations, Gabriel. Serafina is certainly remarkable." He didn't catch the subtle, necessary hesitation in my voice. Instead, he glanced at the platinum wristwatch I had never seen before. A Patek Philippe, a silent indicator of his inflated status. "Actually, I needed to speak with you about the honeymoon payment. There was an issue with the resort, and there it was. The real, unvarnished reason he had sought me out in the chilly night air. They're asking for the final installment tonight instead of next week. Just the final $30,000, he finished quickly. I'd handle it myself, but with the wedding costs, the down payment, everything is tied up." He looked not at me, but through me, toward the glittering reception inside. Behind him, through the terrace doors, I could see Serafina holding court among her bridesmaids, all size 0 in identical champagne-colored dresses that likely cost more than my mortgage payment. She caught my eye and whispered something that made the others giggle behind manicured hands. In that moment, my future crystallized with painful certainty. I would become the ATM mother-in-law, useful only for financial emergencies and occasional holiday appearances, where I would be seated by the kitchen or the bathroom, or perhaps next time, in the actual servants' quarters. "Gabriel," I said carefully, forcing the words out, "does Senator Sterling know I'm paying for your honeymoon?" His expression answered before his words did. "We agreed that was private. Like we agreed the down payment on your luxury condo was private, and the country club membership was private." I stepped closer, closing the distance between us. "Tell me, does Serafina know about your student loans? The ones I'm still helping you pay off?" His face flushed a deep, shaming red. "That's different. That was an investment in my future. And what is this?" I gestured toward the reception hall. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you're mortgaging your soul for admission to a world that will never truly accept you." "Not the real you? The real me?" He laughed, a brittle, harsh sound. Nothing like his father Theodore's warm chuckle. The real me isn't the small-town doctor son of a literature professor. Mother, I've outgrown South Carolina. Have you outgrown decency too? The question escaped before I could temper it. Because the Gabriel I raised would never have seated his mother by the kitchen doors, while strangers took the places of honor. A momentary, fleeting crack appeared in his carefully constructed veneer. For a split second, I glimpsed my actual son, the one who cried at a dog's life and brought me wildflowers on random Tuesdays. Then Serafina's voice cut through the cool night air. Gabriel, Daddy is looking for you. The photographer needs the family portraits. She appeared at the terrace doors, her white gown luminous in the moonlight. Her eyes flickered over me dismissively. Oh, Lillian, I hope you're enjoying the celebration. Immensely, I replied, my southern manners kicking in automatically, injecting a subtle steel into my voice. Especially my prime viewing spot for the kitchen choreography. Serafina's smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened instantly. We had to make some last-minute adjustments. I'm sure a practical woman like yourself understands. Come, darling, Gabriel said, straightening his shoulders. He added in a lower voice, barely audible, I'll text you the account details. They left me standing alone on the terrace, the weight of 3 decades of motherhood pressing down on me like an anvil. From inside came the announcement for the father-daughter dance. I couldn't bear to watch. I stared out at the dark, infinite bay, my mind fixed on the antique writing desk in my study back home, the desk Serafina had called shabby during her only visit to South Carolina. The one with the hidden compartment containing my great-grandfather's legacy, documentation of rare literary manuscripts worth millions, collected over a lifetime of scholarship. I had never told Gabriel about the collection. I had planned to surprise him someday when he found the right path, the right partner, the right reasons. I thought of those treasures now, imagining Serafina's horrified reaction if she knew her shabby mother-in-law was sitting on a fortune that would make even the Sterlings take notice. But as the gentle crash of waves punctuated the night, I realized some treasures weren't meant to be shared until they could be properly valued. And right now, neither my son nor his bride seemed capable of valuing anything beyond its fleeting social currency. My phone buzzed, Gabriel's text. The account details for the final $30,000 payment. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the banking app icon. Behind me, the reception continued, a monument to excess and manufactured appearances. Ahead of me stretched the decision that would define my relationship with my only child for years to come. With steady, deliberate hands, I put the phone back in my purse, closed the clasp, and walked away without replying. The hotel room felt cavernous at midnight. I sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, still wearing my navy dress, staring at the phone clutched in my hand. 3 missed calls from Gabriel, 5 text messages, each one more urgent, more demanding than the last. Need to confirm payment tonight. Resort needs confirmation by midnight. Mother, please respond. This is important. Are you trying to embarrass me? The final message, a sharp, accusatory sting, wounded me like a physical slap. I, who had mortgaged my beloved home to put him through medical school. I, who had driven 14 hours straight when he failed his first major exam and needed a shoulder to cry on. I, who had nursed his broken heart after Rachel left. I was somehow the one capable of embarrassing him. Outside my window, the historic harbor district dotted the coastline like ghost ships, their lights twinkling against the velvet black of night. I'd always wanted to visit these grand, imposing cities, to walk their historic streets. How bitterly ironic that I'd finally made it here, only to be hidden away by the kitchen at my only child's wedding. My phone buzzed again. Gabriel's face appeared on the screen, indicating a call. I answered before I could talk myself out of it. It's past midnight, I said softly, my voice calm, controlled. Where have you been? His voice was tight, a thread of controlled fury vibrating beneath the surface. The resort manager has been waiting for confirmation. Serafina's father nearly offered to pay when he overheard us discussing it. Did you let him? A sharp intake of breath. Of course not. I told him it was handled. But it isn't handled, is it, Gabriel? I rose from the bed and moved to the window, watching a distant beacon sweep its clear light across the darkness. Because you assumed I would pay without question, as I always have. Mother, we discussed this. You agreed to help with the honeymoon as your wedding gift. I agreed to help with a honeymoon, not a 3-week extravaganza costing $93,000 that you didn't bother to consult me about. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. And I certainly never agreed to be treated like an inconvenient relative at your wedding. Silence stretched between us, taut as a wire. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted to the placating, manipulative tone he used with difficult patience. The seating was unfortunate, I admit. Serafina has apologized for the oversight. Has she? To whom? Because she certainly hasn't apologized to me. Another pause. She feels terrible about it. The lie hung in the air, so transparent it was almost laughable. I thought of Serafina's distinct smirk when she'd glanced at my table. The deliberate way she'd maneuvered me out of family photos. The whispered, cruel comments to her bridesmaids. Gabriel, I said quietly, changing tactics. Do you remember when you were 16 and you desperately wanted those expensive sneakers everyone had? The ones that cost nearly $200? Mother, this isn't the time for you. Your father and I couldn't afford them. But instead of telling you that, we said you had to earn them. You spent that entire summer mowing lawns and washing cars until you had enough. What does this have to do with anything? You were so proud of those shoes. You kept them spotless, treasured them, because you knew exactly what they cost you, I said, taking a deep, steadying breath. I think somewhere along the way, you've forgotten the value of things that come too easily. This is about money? His voice rose again, bordering on hysterical. I'm a successful surgeon. I'll pay you back every cent once my practice expands. No, Gabriel. This isn't about money. It's about respect. It's about the fact that you allowed your bride to seat your mother, your only living parent, by the kitchen doors, while people who have known you for mere minutes occupied the places of honor. He started to interrupt. But I continued, my voice growing stronger, fueled by a righteous anger that had simmered for decades. It's about watching you transform into someone I don't recognize, all to impress people who measure worth by zip codes and club memberships. It's about you being ashamed of where you came from, ashamed of me, when everything I've ever done has been to give you those opportunities. That's not fair, he protested, but the conviction had drained from his voice. What's not fair is expecting me to finance a lifestyle that explicitly excludes me. I straightened my shoulders, feeling a strange, cleansing lightness spreading through me. The honeymoon payment won't be coming, Gabriel. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the distant, rhythmic crash of waves against the coastline. You can't be serious. His voice had dropped to a stunned, terrified whisper. We leave tomorrow afternoon. Everything is arranged. Then I suggest you have an honest conversation with your wife about your actual finances. Or perhaps the Sterlings would be delighted to cover it, given their apparent wealth. Mother, please. For the first time, real panic edged into his voice, the terrifying sound of a man watching his carefully built facade crumble. Serafina will be devastated. Her friends have been following the planning for months. The resort is exclusive. We'll never get those dates again. I'm sorry, Gabriel. Truly I am. My voice was soft now, laced with genuine sorrow, but unwavering resolve. But this is a moment of clarity for me, and I hope someday it might be for you too. I love you enough to stop enabling behavior that's changing you into someone you were never meant to be. If you do this, he said, his voice hardening into a final venomous threat, don't expect to be welcome in our lives. The threat should have devastated me. Instead, it confirmed what I already knew. In his current, corrupted state, my son's love was entirely conditional, based solely on what I could provide rather than who I was. That would break my heart, I said truthfully. But continuing as we have would break something even more fundamental. I ended the call before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I removed my dress, hung it carefully in the closet, changed into my nightgown, and slipped between the hotel's luxurious sheets. For the first time since arriving, I felt like myself again. Not Gabriel's ATM, not the embarrassing Southern mother to be hidden away, but Lillian Cross, literature professor, widow of Theodore Cross, guardian of a literary legacy, and a woman who had finally, definitively found her limit. My phone buzzed repeatedly on the nightstand. Text messages, then emails, then frantic voicemails. First from Gabriel, then surprisingly from Serafina herself. I turned the phone face down without reading or listening to any of them. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Anger, perhaps permanent damage to my relationship with my only child. The thought brought tears to my eyes, but it did not bring regret to my heart. Sometimes love meant standing firm when it would have been tragically easier to give in. Outside, the beacon continued its steady, sweeping arc across the darkness, a stark reminder that even in the blackest night, clarity could arrive in unexpected flashes of light. I closed my eyes and dreamed only of home. The sharp, insistent knock came at 7:15 in the morning. 3 quick, aggressive raps that cut through my fitful sleep like gunshots. I sat up, momentarily disoriented in the unfamiliar hotel room. The digital clock's red numbers seemed to pulse accusingly as another, more violent round of knocking began. "Lillian! I know you're in there!" Serafina's voice, stripped of its usual social veneer, sounded thin and shrill through the heavy door. "We need to talk now." I wrapped the thick hotel robe tightly around my nightgown and smoothed my silver hair as best I could before crossing the floor and pulling the door open. Serafina stood in the hallway, already impeccably dressed in a cream-colored knit suit, her honeymoon travel outfit. No doubt, her hair pulled back into a severe chignon. Her makeup was flawless, despite the early hour. Only the tight, furious line of her mouth and the cold, hard flash in her eyes betrayed the depth of her rage and humiliation. "May I come in?" She didn't wait for an answer, brushing past me into the room with an almost aggressive movement. The scent of her expensive perfume, something fiercely French and exclusive, momentarily overwhelmed the space. "Good morning, Serafina," I said, closing the door and locking the deadbolt with a decisive click. "Congratulations again on your beautiful wedding." Her head snapped toward me, her nostrils flaring slightly in visible disdain. "Don't play sweet Southern matron with me. Gabriel told me what you're doing." I moved to the window and opened the curtains, letting the bright, uncompromising morning light flood the room. Outside, the coastline glittered in the early sun, the ocean a startling shade of blue. Theodore would have called heartbreakingly beautiful. "And what exactly am I doing?" I asked, turning to face my new daughter-in-law. "Withholding the honeymoon money." She spat, the words sharp and venomous. "Trying to ruin the most important trip of our lives." "Because what? You didn't like your table at the reception?" I studied her face. So objectively beautiful, so carefully cultivated, and yet so utterly, devastatingly unaware of her own cruelty. In that moment, I felt a surprising, fleeting flash of pity. The table was a symptom. Serafina, not the cause. I gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing, arms crossed defensively over her chest. "I've been enabling behavior that isn't healthy for Gabriel, or frankly, for your marriage." "Enabling?" She laughed, a brittle, humorless sound that shattered the morning peace. "You've been acting like a typical mother-in-law trying to control everything. Gabriel warned me you might pull something like this." The casual, cruel rewriting of history should have angered me into a fresh rage, but instead, it simply clarified something critical. "What exactly has Gabriel told you about our family finances?" She tossed her head with a familiar dismissiveness. "That you're comfortable enough. The house in South Carolina is paid off. You have retirement savings." Her eyes narrowed into predatory slits. "And that you promised to pay for the honeymoon months ago." "Did he mention that I remortgaged that house to pay for his medical school?" I kept my voice gentle, almost conversational. "Or that I've contributed over $150,000 to your wedding already?" Serafina's perfect composure faltered abruptly. "What? What are you talking about?" "The vintage champagne at the reception. The custom-made gown you're wearing. the string quartet, the photographer from Paris. I ticked off the items slowly on my fingers. Gabriel came to me privately about each one, saying he couldn't bear to disappoint you, but simply couldn't afford these things himself. She sank slowly onto the edge of the bed, her cream suit fabric crinkling slightly, her eyes wide with shock. That's not possible. Gabriel makes an excellent salary. And the wedding was... She stopped abruptly, realizing the terrifying implication of her own words. Paid for by your parents, I finished for her. Some of it, certainly, but not all. Not even most of it. Genuine confusion clouded her perfect features. But he said he told Daddy he was handling his share. That's why Daddy respected him, because he insisted on paying his portion as a matter of pride. Gabriel has always had pride, I agreed, rising and moving to sit in the armchair across from her. But lately, it's been writing checks his bank account couldn't cash. Did you know he's still paying off student loans? That he remortgaged his condo just to buy your engagement ring? She stared at me, her mascara-perfect eyes wide with disbelief. Why would he do that? If he couldn't afford these things, he should have said so. My family has more than enough. Exactly, I said softly, the single word hanging heavy in the air. Your family has more than enough, and Gabriel felt he needed to compete on your level to prove himself worthy of you and your world. Serafina looked down at her massive diamond wedding band, twisting it nervously on her finger. So this is some kind of lesson? Withholding the honeymoon money to teach us budgeting? No, it's about honesty and respect. I leaned forward, my tone hardening slightly. Serafina, you deliberately seated me by the kitchen doors, away from every meaningful moment of my only child's wedding. She had the good grace to flush a deep crimson. It wasn't personal. The ambassador's family are major political allies. Senator Mitchell is a major donor to Daddy's foundation. They needed those premium spots more than the mother of the groom needed to see her son's first dance or be included in family photos. I shook my head slowly, pity turning back into cold resolve. You made a choice about my value in Gabriel's life. I am simply responding to that message. Her flush deepened, and her embarrassment was quickly replaced by a furious anger. So this is revenge. This is consequence, I corrected. In my family, we believe actions reveal truth. Your actions told me exactly where I stand. Why would you expect me to fund a honeymoon for a couple who couldn't even find a respectful place for me at their reception? Serafina stood up abruptly, pacing the room in sharp, agitated movements. We leave in 7 hours. The seaplane transfer is non-refundable. The villa has been prepared. Our friends know our itinerary. Do you have any idea how humiliating it will be to cancel? About as humiliating as being the only mother seated by the kitchen, perhaps. I suggested mildly. She whirled to face me, her eyes blazing. What do you want? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry about the stupid table. It was thoughtless. Now, will you transfer the money? The palpable insincerity of her apology hung in the air between us. In her world, apologies were purely transactional. Something to be offered when necessary to immediately get what you wanted, not an expression of genuine remorse. I think, I said carefully, rising to stand, what I want is for my son to remember who he is, and for you to see him, the real him, not the version you fashioned to fit into your world. You don't know anything about how I see him. She snapped. I know you've never asked about his childhood. Never expressed interest in the family photos I offered to share. Never inquired about his father, who would have loved to see this day. I tightened the belt of my robe. The Gabriel you're marrying is a fabrication. Serafina, a man crippling himself financially to maintain an illusion for your benefit. Tears of pure frustration filled her eyes, and one escaped, leaving a black mascara track down her perfect cheek. You're just a bitter old woman who can't stand that her son has moved up in the world. The words were meant to wound, but they fell strangely flat. Perhaps. Or perhaps I'm a mother who sees her son making the same mistake his father once made. She stilled instantly. What mistake? Believing that love should require constant proving, constant sacrifice. I walked to the hotel desk and removed something small from my purse, a faded, cherished photograph I always carried. Theodore nearly bankrupted us, trying to give me the life he thought I deserved. It almost destroyed our marriage until I convinced him I hadn't fallen in love with his wallet. I handed her the photo, Theodore and me on our porch swing in South Carolina, his arm around me, both of us laughing at some forgotten joke. Simple, real. Serafina stared at the image, something shifting in her expression. For a fleeting moment, I glimpsed uncertainty beneath her polished, rigid exterior. "Gabriel loves you," I said gently. "But the question is whether you love Gabriel, the actual man, not the surgeon with the political connections and the city apartment. Because that man is drowning, trying to be someone he is not." She handed the photo back without comment. Her face once again composed into unreadable, fragile perfection. "I'll tell Gabriel," she finally spoke, her voice flat. "I assume you're still refusing to transfer the funds." I nodded. "I am. Then I suppose we're done here." She moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the knob, her back to me. Without turning, she added, in a voice barely audible, "For what it's worth, the table wasn't my idea. It was my mother's." She paused, taking a breath. "She said it would help Gabriel cut ties with his provincial past." The door closed behind her with a soft, definitive click, leaving me alone with the morning light and the unbearable weight of words spoken and truths revealed. The hotel restaurant overlooked the harbor, sailboat masts swaying gently in the morning breeze. I sipped my tea and picked at a blueberry muffin, watching wealthy vacationers stroll along the docks. My flight back to South Carolina wasn't until late afternoon, leaving me hours to contemplate the emotional wreckage of the past 24 hours. I hadn't heard from Gabriel since Serafina's visit. The silence felt both ominous and inevitable. Mrs. Cross. I looked up to find Senator Sterling, Serafina's father, standing beside my table. In his tailored navy blazer with gold buttons and crisp white slacks, he embodied old East Coast money, the kind that whispered rather than shouted its privilege. "Senator Sterling," I acknowledged, automatically straightening my posture. "Good morning. May I join you?" Without waiting for my response, he signaled a waiter. "Coffee, black, and whatever the lady would like." "Just a refill on my tea, thank you." I studied Senator Sterling as he settled into the chair across from me. His silver hair was expertly cut, his tanned face relatively unlined for a man in his mid-60s. Only his eyes, shrewd and assessing, betrayed the hard, relentless calculation behind his political persona. "Beautiful day," he remarked, gazing out at the water. "New England in autumn. Nothing quite like it." "It's lovely," I agreed, bracing myself for the inevitable attempt to persuade or threaten me about the honeymoon money. The waiter returned with our drinks. Senator Sterling waited until he had gone before leaning forward slightly. "I understand there's been some confusion about the honeymoon arrangements. Direct and unapologetic." I could appreciate that at least. "No confusion, Senator Sterling. Simply a change of plans on my part." He nodded slowly, as if I'd confirmed a long-held suspicion. "You know, when Gabriel first approached me about marrying my daughter, I had him thoroughly investigated." The statement, dropped so casually between sips of coffee, shouldn't have surprised me. Of course, the Sterlings would investigate potential additions to their dynasty. "Standard procedure in our circles," he continued, noting my lack of shock. "Assets, liabilities, family connections, potential scandals. We like to know what we're getting into." "And what did your investigation reveal about my son?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly neutral. "A promising surgeon with mounting debt. A man living well beyond his means to impress my daughter." Senator Sterling's gaze was unflinching, and a history of allowing his mother to bail him out financially while keeping her at arm's length socially. The brutal accuracy of his assessment stung me deeply. "You make him sound calculated." "Not calculated. Desperate," Senator Sterling corrected, setting down his coffee cup with a decisive click. "Desperate to belong in a world that demands certain appearances, certain connections. A world my wife and daughter navigate ruthlessly, I'm afraid." The frank admission caught me completely off guard. "Yet you allowed the marriage to proceed." "I did." He glanced out at the harbor again. Because beneath the designer suits and the social climbing, I saw something in Gabriel that reminded me of myself 40 years ago. A young man in love, not just with a woman, but with the promise of a certain life. I studied Senator Sterling with new, complex interest. His casual reference to his own social climbing suggested hidden depths beneath the polished exterior. What was your background, Senator Sterling? Before you became... I gestured vaguely at his perfect attire, the undeniable aura of privilege he now projected. A faint, self-deprecating smile touched his lips. Steelworker's son from Western Pennsylvania. Scholarship to Yale. Married Camilla, whose family had more ancestry than actual cash flow. He shrugged. I built the fortune. She provided the pedigree, a common arrangement in our world, though we pretend otherwise. This revelation shifted my entire perception of the Sterling family drama. And now you've built an empire, a profitable one. But empires have costs, Mrs. Cross. His expression grew somber. My wife and daughter compete in a social arena where appearance is everything, and kindness is often viewed as weakness. It's a world I enabled, but have come to find increasingly hollow. The honesty in his voice seemed genuinely surprising. Why are you telling me this? Senator Sterling sighed, suddenly looking his age. Because I recognize the look on your face at the reception. A parent watching their child make compromising choices for all the wrong reasons. He leaned forward conspiratorially. When I learned Gabriel had been asking you to finance aspects of this wedding while telling us he was handling everything himself, I knew exactly what was happening. And what was that? He was mortgaging his integrity to buy entry into our world. Senator Sterling's voice softened, reflecting a painful memory. Just as I once did. I set down my teacup, struck by the unexpected quiet alliance forming across the breakfast table. Then you understand why I couldn't continue enabling it. I do, he nodded firmly. Though Serafina and Camilla are displeased, to put it mildly, the honeymoon has been canceled. Gabriel is facing some uncomfortable questions about his actual finances, and my wife is already suggesting we reconsider certain wedding gifts. The pettiness of their vindictiveness didn't surprise me at all. I'm sorry for the disruption, but not for the decision. Nor should you be. Senator Sterling reached into his jacket and removed a small, official-looking envelope, placing it deliberately on the table between us. This is information Gabriel and your son might find valuable. I eyed the envelope wearily. What is it? It's about his wife's past, and about certain financial arrangements my wife insisted upon that he isn't aware of. Information that clarifies the true nature of the Sterling family's investment in your son. My hand hovered over the envelope. Why would you share this with me, Senator Sterling? Senator Sterling's expression turned grave, almost poignant. Because, contrary to what my daughter and wife believe, I haven't forgotten where I came from or what actually matters. And because I recognize in you someone who values truth over appearances, a rare quality in our circles. He stood, adjusting his blazer with practiced ease, laying several bills on the table despite the meal certainly being charged to his room. One more thing. Mrs. Cross, that historic home of yours in South Carolina, Gabriel mentioned it was built by a noted academic in the 1890s. The apparent non sequitur confused me. Yes, my great-grandfather, Theodore Cross Sr. He was a literature professor and a collector. Senator Sterling's eyes gleamed with something intense and knowing. I thought so. Theodore's legacy is quite legendary in certain circles. My breath caught in my throat, a sudden, alarming realization dawning. Very few people, outside of a specialized few, knew about my great-grandfather's literary treasures. You know about the collection? I sit on the board of the Library of Congress Rare Book Division, he explained, a faint, almost secret smile playing on his lips. When Gabriel described your charming family home, I wondered if it might be that Cross residence, the one rumored to contain first editions of Walt Whitman, Thoreau and Melville, among others. For the first time since arriving, I felt the ground steady beneath my feet. Gabriel has no idea. Does he about the true value of what you possess? None. Senator Sterling's smile now held a hint of profound satisfaction. Nor does my daughter, who I believe... referred to your home as shabby provincial after her visit. She did, I replied, managing to return his smile. A genuine, fierce smile that felt utterly authentic. Well, he straightened his already perfect posture. Perhaps there are lessons about value still to be learned by both of them. With a slight, definitive nod, he added, "Safe travels back to South Carolina. Mrs. Cross, I suspect we'll be speaking again." As he walked away, I opened the envelope. Inside were bank statements showing a prenuptial agreement that heavily favored Serafina, along with documentation of a secret trust fund Camilla Sterling had established that would only trigger if Gabriel achieved certain career and social milestones. They had been assessing my son's value just as coldly as he had been inflating his worth to impress them. I refolded the papers, a curious, powerful calm settling over me. The morning light streamed through the restaurant windows, illuminating the harbor, where ships had once carried valuable cargo to and from distant shores. How fitting that here a different kind of exchange had just occurred. Truth traded for truth, with my son's future happiness as the profound, priceless prize. Dr. Cross, a successful surgeon, had an unfortunate history of allowing his mother to bail him out financially while keeping her at arm's length socially. The words from Senator Sterling's investigation echoed in my mind as I drove the sedan south, the smooth, reliable motion of the car, a soothing contrast to the emotional turmoil of the past days. I had decided against flying, allowing the 14 hours on the open road to serve as a necessary cleansing ritual. I was somewhere deep in North Carolina, the landscape shifting from suburban sprawl to green highway corridors, when my phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. Gabriel's name flashed on the dashboard screen. I took a deep, fortifying breath and pressed the answer button. "Hello, Gabriel?" Silence stretched for several seconds, heavy with unvoiced recriminations. "Where are you?" "On the road." I decided to drive home. We didn't get to say goodbye. The understated accusation in his tone made me grip the steering wheel tighter. "You've been rather busy, I imagine." "Busy dealing with the catastrophe you created." His voice hardened, filled with genuine fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I signaled and moved into the passing lane, giving myself time to formulate a response. "I made a difficult decision that I believe was necessary." "Necessary?" He gave a harsh, incredulous laugh. "Serafina's friends have been texting her all day. Her sister posted about the amazing villa online yesterday. Now everyone knows we're not going. She's humiliated." "I'm sorry for her discomfort," I said carefully, neutrally. "But perhaps this is an opportunity for honesty about your financial situation. That's rich coming from you." The venom in his voice took me aback. "What do you mean?" "I met with Senator Sterling this morning." My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected Senator Sterling to speak with Gabriel so soon. "Did you?" "Theodore's legacy." Gabriel's voice dripped with bitter, wounded accusation. "First edition's worth millions. Manuscripts museums would kill for. All sitting in that modest house you've been living in, while I worked myself to the bone to build a career." I took the next exit off the highway, pulling into a rest stop parking lot. This conversation could not be conducted while driving. I turned off the engine, watching raindrops begin to speckle the windshield. "Gabriel, I never hid anything from you. You simply never shared it. You presented yourself as this humble teacher who sacrificed everything for me." His voice rose, vibrating with years of repressed guilt and misunderstanding. "All those guilt trips about remortgaging the house for my education, when the house contains enough valuable books to buy a hospital." "The collection was never meant to be sold," I explained calmly, deliberately. "It's a legacy, a trust. Your great-grandfather spent his life building it, a legacy you never bothered to share with me. Your own son." The hurt beneath his anger was finally visible, raw and painful. "I was waiting for the right time," I said softly, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass. "For you to show interest in your family history beyond what it could buy you. That's not fair, Mother, is it?" I watched the rain fall harder, blurring the world outside. "Gabriel, when was the last time you asked about my life, about your father's research, about anything related to our family that wasn't connected to your immediate needs?" I always planned to share the collection with you, I continued gently, my voice laced with sorrow. But over the years, you made it increasingly clear that South Carolina, our home, our history, they were embarrassments to be overcome, not treasures to be preserved. So this was some kind of test? Watching me struggle financially when you were sitting on a fortune? No, Gabriel. This was me hoping my son would eventually remember what actually matters. I sighed, the sound filling the quiet car. The same hope Senator Sterling apparently holds for his daughter. Senator Sterling. Gabriel's voice turned bitter again. He showed me the prenup. Did you know about that too? I only learned of it this morning. Gabriel, why did you lie to the Sterlings about paying for the wedding yourself? The question hung between us, heavy with implication. When he finally answered, his voice lost its sharp edge, sounding suddenly young and vulnerable. Because Senator Sterling built his empire from nothing. He came from steelworkers and made himself into a legend. How could I admit that I needed my mother's help to afford the life his daughter expected? What kind of man would that make me in his eyes? The irony was so profound it almost made me weep. The kind of man he was, Gabriel. The kind of man who understands that worth isn't measured by the size of your bank account. Rain drummed on the roof of the car, creating a cocoon of white noise around our difficult, painful truths. Serafina's devastated about the honeymoon, he said finally. The anger exhausted, replaced by a hollow confusion. She thinks you did it to punish her. And what do you think? He sighed heavily, the sound of a man waking up after a long, expensive sleep. I think I've been trying so hard to belong in her world that I forgot to question if it was a world worth belonging to. Hope fluttered in my chest, fragile as a newly emerged butterfly. And now? Now everything's a mess. Her mother is talking about re-evaluating the union. Serafina keeps vacillating between tears and fury, and I'm standing in the middle wondering how I got here. One compromise at a time, I said gently. One little sacrifice of authenticity after another. The silence that followed felt different. Thoughtful rather than hostile. Do you remember? He said eventually. That summer we went to the Outer Banks? When I was 12? The question surprised me with its seeming randomness. Of course. Your father was researching his book on coastal dialects. We rented that little blue cottage. We couldn't afford the fancy restaurants, so Dad grilled fresh fish every night on that rusty charcoal grill. Gabriel's voice softened with the cherished memory. And you brought all those paperbacks of classic sea adventures that we read aloud on the porch. Melville, Conrad, Stevenson, I recalled, smiling despite myself. Your father did all the character voices. That was the happiest I ever remember us being. The simple statement held such painful weight. No pretensions. No keeping up with anyone. Just us. Rain continued to fall outside, washing the world clean. We were happy, Gabriel, I affirmed. Not because of what we had, but because of who we were together. I don't think Serafina would understand that kind of happiness. The realization seemed to genuinely pain him. Last night, after you refused the money, do you know what she said? That we could still salvage the situation by taking Instagram photos at luxury hotels nearby and pretending we were in the Seychelles. That no one would know the difference. The depth of the deception shocked me anew. And how did you respond? I said I was tired of pretending. His voice cracked slightly. I don't think she's ever heard me say no before. We sat in silence again, the rain creating a gentle percussion on the car roof. Finally, Gabriel spoke again. The honeymoon's canceled for good, not just postponed. I see. I kept my voice neutral, waiting. I told Serafina I need space to think. To figure out what's real and what's performance in my life. He sounded exhausted, but clearer somehow. I'm going to stay with my friend Dr. Ellis for a few days. He's chief resident at Boston General, lives in a tiny apartment, and drives a 10-year-old Honda. The Dr. Ellis you played basketball with in medical school? Yes. I could hear the surprise in his voice that I remembered the detail. You sent him that care package when he was studying for boards, homemade cookies and coffee, I recalled. He sent such a lovely thank you note. He always said you were the mom he wished he'd had. Gabriel paused. I haven't seen much of him lately. Serafina thought he was too ordinary. The word hung in the air, its judgment now turned inside out. Well, I said carefully, ordinary has its virtues. Yes. A deep, shaky breath. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need the absolute truth. All those times you helped me financially, the tuition, the condo down payment, the wedding, did it hurt you? Were you sacrificing your own security? The question so long in coming brought tears to my eyes. No, Gabriel. Theodore's legacy may be valuable, but I never touched it. I helped you from my savings, from your father's life insurance. I was careful, but I was never in danger. And the remortgage? A small one, long since paid off. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. I may have emphasized it more than strictly necessary when you were making choices I thought unwise. A surprised laugh escaped him. The first genuine one I'd heard in too long. Manipulative. Strategic, I corrected, my own smile growing. A mother's prerogative. The rain began to ease, sunshine breaking through in dappled patches. I don't know what happens next, Gabriel admitted. With Serafina, with the Sterlings, with any of it, you don't have to know today, I assured him. Just promise me one thing. What's that? That whatever you decide, it will be the real Gabriel Cross making the choice. Not the man you thought you needed to be for Serafina or her world. I'll try. He sounded both lost and found, a paradox I understood completely. Drive safely, Mom, and thank you for not giving up on me. After we hung up, I sat watching the rain clear completely, a vivid rainbow forming over the highway ahead. The road to South Carolina stretched long before me, but for the first time since arriving, the journey felt perfectly, unequivocally right. I arrived home as dawn broke over South Carolina. The city was still peaceful in its early morning slumber. My house, a stately Victorian on a moss-draped street in the historic district, welcomed me with familiar creaks and sighs as I unlocked the door. After the opulence of the wedding city and the emotional tumult of the past few days, its well-worn comfort felt like a physical embrace. I dropped my bags in the foyer and moved through the rooms, running my fingers along the spines of volumes on the bookshelves, books that had witnessed generations of cross-life. In my study, behind a false panel in the antique writing desk Serafina had dismissed as shabby, lay the heart of Theodore's legacy. First editions of Thoreau, Emerson and Whitman, original manuscripts from Melville and Hawthorne, correspondence between literary giants of the 19th century, treasures beyond price, not because of their market value, but because of the passion and dedication they represented. My great-grandfather had built this collection volume by volume, sacrificing comfort and convenience for the love of literature and ideas. It was never meant to be sold or leveraged, only preserved, appreciated, and eventually passed on to someone who would honor its legacy. I had always assumed that someone would be Gabriel. As the kettle whistled, my phone rang. Not Gabriel this time, but a number I didn't recognize. Hello, Mrs. Cross. This is Audrey Sterling. I nearly dropped my mug. Serafina's sister. Yes. Her voice was lower than Serafina's, less practiced in its cadence. I hope you don't mind my calling. Father gave me your number. I carried my tea to the porch swing, Theodore's favorite spot for Sunday morning contemplation. Not at all. What can I do for you, Audrey? I wanted to apologize. The directness was stunning. For my family's behavior at the wedding, especially the seating arrangement. It was cruel and deliberate, and I should have said something. I watched a cardinal land on the feeder hanging from my oak tree. You weren't responsible for the seating chart. No, but I saw what was happening and stayed silent. My mother and Serafina can be, well, there's a reason I live in Denver and visit as infrequently as possible. I appreciate your call, Audrey, but I'm curious about its timing, she sighed, the sound carrying clearly across the miles. Father told me what happened with the honeymoon and about your conversation. He said you were a woman of substance who deserved better than we showed her. Senator Sterling continued to surprise me. That was generous of him. Father has always been the only one of us with both money and perspective. Audrey's tone held a filial affection. The rest of us tend to have one or the other, but rarely both. And which category do you fall into? Perspective, definitely. I teach middle school in a public school district. Mother nearly had apoplexy when I chose education over finance. It's honorable work. It's real work, Audrey countered, which is more than I can say for much of what occupies my mother and sister's time. She paused. Gabriel called me last night, did he? My heart skipped a beat. He asked about Dr. Ellis, whether I remembered him from college. Dr. Ellis was the kindest person in Gabriel's medical school friend group, the one who organized study sessions and made sure everyone ate during finals week. Serafina always referred to him as the charity case because he was on scholarship. The casual cruelty felt familiar. Gabriel mentioned he might stay with Dr. Ellis for a while. He is. They're having breakfast together as we speak. A note of hope entered Audrey's voice. Gabriel sounded different, more like the person I remember from before he and Serafina became serious. He asked me about my students, my life in Denver. Real questions, not just social niceties. I closed my eyes, feeling the gentle rock of the porch swing. That sounds like my son, Mrs. Cross. Lillian, please, Audrey. She seemed to gather her thoughts. I want you to know that what you did, refusing to finance that ridiculous honeymoon, it was the right thing. Painful, but right. For years, I've watched Serafina and my mother collect people like accessories, valuing them only for what they add to the sterling image. And Gabriel was a handsome, accomplished accessory, I concluded. Exactly. They were molding him into their version of the perfect son-in-law, and he was letting it happen. Genuine concern filled her voice. When I saw how they treated you, it was illuminating. It was unconscionable. Audrey's tone turned resolute. Which is why I've decided to stay for a few more days. Father and I are having dinner with Gabriel tomorrow evening. Mother and Serafina are beside themselves that we would betray family loyalty this way. The unexpected alliance between Audrey, Senator Sterling, and potentially Gabriel sent a surge of hope through me. Father mentioned your collection, the books and manuscripts. He did his research, she said, surprised again by Senator Sterling's thoroughness. He respects what it represents. Multi-generational commitment to something meaningful. Her voice grew quieter. I think he sees in you the road not taken, the values he compromised to build his empire. Your father is a more complex man than he appears. Most of us are, Audrey replied, which is why I'm cautiously optimistic about Gabriel. Beneath all that DC polish, I caught glimpses of someone thoughtful, someone who might still remember what matters. We talked for a few more minutes, exchanging contact information and tentative plans to stay in touch. After we hung up, I remained on the porch swing, watching morning light play through the Spanish moss that draped my oak trees like delicate lace. 3 days ago, I had felt utterly alone, relegated to the kitchen table. Now somehow, unexpected allies had emerged. From the very family I'd viewed as the enemy, my phone pinged with a text message. Gabriel, having breakfast with Dr. Ellis, talking about things that matter for the first time in ages. We'll call later. Simple words, but they carried a weight of hope that made my eyes sting with grateful tears. I typed back, love you. Take all the time you need. The cardinal at my feeder had been joined by its mate, the two birds working in perfect harmony, each allowing the other space and sustenance in equal measure. 2 weeks passed. Spring settled fully over South Carolina, jasmine scenting the air and azaleas blazing in every garden. I returned to my routine, teaching my literature classes at the college, tending my garden, meeting my book club for our monthly discussion. Life resumed its comfortable rhythm, though thoughts of Gabriel were never far from my mind. We spoke briefly every few days, short, careful conversations, as if we were both relearning how to talk to each other without the weight of expectations and financial entanglements. He remained in Boston, still staying with Dr. Ellis, still figuring things out with Serafina, who had returned to Washington, D.C. to live with her parents while they reassessed the situation. Audrey Sterling called occasionally, offering gentle updates on the family dynamics. Camilla Sterling was predictably furious about the canceled honeymoon, directing most of her anger at me for what she called my vindictive interference. Senator Sterling, surprisingly, had defended my actions to his wife, causing what Audrey described as the most honest argument they'd had in 20 years. I was pruning roses in my front garden when the black town car pulled up to the curb. The driver emerged first, opening the rear door with practiced deference. When Serafina Sterling stepped onto my sidewalk, I nearly dropped my pruning shears. She looked both the same and profoundly different. The designer outfit and perfect makeup remained, but something in her posture had shifted. Less rigid, perhaps less certain. "Mrs. Cross," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. "May I speak with you?" I removed my gardening gloves, conscious of the dirt under my fingernails and the sweat dampening my cotton shirt. "This is unexpected, Serafina. For me as well." She glanced at my home, taking in the wraparound porch with its ceiling painted haint blue in the old Gullah tradition, the carefully preserved gingerbread trim, the mature oak trees that had witnessed over a century of South Carolina history. "Your house is lovely." The admission seemed to cost her something significant. I nodded toward the porch. "Would you like some tea? It's rather warm out here." She followed me inside, her designer heels clicking against the heart pine floors that Theodore had spent a summer restoring by hand. I was acutely aware of her gaze taking in everything. The antique furniture, the built-in bookshelves laden with volumes, the subtle, unerasable signs of age in a house this old. "Please sit." I gestured to the porch where I'd set out a pitcher of sweet tea that morning. "I'll just wash up quickly." When I returned with clean hands and an extra glass, Serafina was standing by the porch railing, looking out at the riotous garden. "The colors are extraordinary," she remarked. "Did you plant all this yourself?" "Most of it. The roses were my husband's project. I've maintained them since he passed." I poured tea over ice, the glasses sweating immediately in the humid air. "What brings you to South Carolina, Serafina? I assumed you'd be in Washington, D.C. with your family." She accepted the glass but didn't drink, instead tracing a finger through the condensation. "Gabriel asked for an annulment. The news landed like a stone in still water." "I see. He said our marriage was built on mutual deception, that we were in love with images, not people." Her voice remained surprisingly steady. "He said he needed to find himself again before he could consider being with anyone." I took a careful sip of tea, measuring my response. "And how do you feel about that?" "Angry, humiliated, relieved." She finally met my eyes directly. "Confused about which emotion is the most honest?" The self-awareness startled. "Me? That sounds complicated." "It is." She set down her glass and reached for the handbag she'd placed on the porch swing, a Hermes Birkin that probably cost more than a semester of college tuition. From it, she withdrew a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "I came to return this. It belongs with your family." Puzzled, I unwrapped the tissue to find a small leather-bound volume of Thoreau's Walden. Not just any edition, but the rare first printing that had been part of Theodore's legacy. My breath caught. "Where did you get this?" I asked, running my fingers over the delicate, aged binding. "Gabriel gave it to me as a wedding gift." She watched my face carefully. "He said it was a family heirloom that had shaped the cross philosophy for generations." I opened the cover, seeing the familiar inscription in my great-grandfather's careful hand. "In wildness is the preservation of the world, and in simplicity the salvation of the soul." "Did you read it?" I asked softly. I tried. A hint of genuine regret colored her voice. It seemed important to Gabriel, but I couldn't understand why anyone would choose to live in the woods when they could have the comforts of civilization. She smoothed her linen dress. "I pretended to love it, of course. Added it to our bookshelf where his colleagues would notice it during dinner parties." The casual admission of such calculated deception should have angered me. Instead, I found myself pitying this young woman who measured life's value in impressions made rather than connections formed. "Why return it now?" I asked. "Because I understand its value now, if not its message." She looked around the porch. taking in the comfortable, worn furniture, the ceiling fan turning lazily overhead, the blooming garden beyond. All of this, it's what Gabriel was trying to make me see. A life built on substance rather than show. I placed the book carefully on the small table between us. And what do you see, Serafina? She straightened, some of her practiced polish returning. I see that I was cruel to you at the wedding, that I allowed my mother's snobbery to influence my treatment of someone who deserved respect. Her gaze met mine directly, this time holding the admission without flinching. I see that I've spent my entire life trying to win approval from people who measure worth by the wrong standards. That's quite an insight, I observed. Don't misunderstand me, Mrs. Cross. I'm not having some grand epiphany about simplicity and abandoning my lifestyle. A hint of her former sharpness returned. I like beautiful things. I enjoy moving in certain circles. I'm not about to start shopping at Target or driving a Honda. I wouldn't expect you to. But, she continued, her voice softening again, I recognize that I crossed a line with you, that my behavior reflected poorly on me, not on you. And I'm sorry. The apology hung between us, surprisingly genuine in its imperfect delivery. I nodded, accepting it without further comment. Gabriel also asked me to give you this. She reached into her handbag again, producing a simple white envelope. He said he wasn't ready to deliver it in person yet, but that it was important you receive it. I took the envelope, feeling its weight, something more than just a letter inside. Thank you. Serafina stood, smoothing her dress again in a gesture I now recognized as self-soothing rather than vanity. I should go. My flight back to Washington, D.C. leaves in 2 hours. You came all this way just to return a book and deliver a letter? She smiled faintly, a tired, honest smile. And to see the famous Cross House for myself, to understand what Gabriel was trying to explain to me about heritage and value. She glanced around once more. It is beautiful in its way. Not what I would choose, but I can see why it matters to your family. I walked her to the door, this young woman who had seated me by the kitchen at her wedding, and was now standing in my foyer with something like respect in her eyes. What will you do now? I asked as we reached the front steps. She considered the question seriously. Reassess. I think Father has suggested I take a more active role in the foundation work. Something beyond just lending my name to galas. She slipped on designer sunglasses, shielding her eyes. Gabriel said something that stuck with me, that I'd never known the satisfaction of earning anything myself. That sounds like my son, I said softly. The real one? Yes. The one I glimpsed occasionally but never fully appreciated. She extended her hand formally. Thank you for seeing me, Mrs. Cross. I hope Gabriel finds what he's looking for. I shook her hand, noting the perfect manicure, the diamond wedding band she still wore. So do I, Serafina, and I hope the same for you. After her car pulled away, I returned to the porch with Gabriel's envelope. Inside, I found a letter and a small velvet pouch. The letter was brief, handwritten on a simple sheet of paper. Mom, I found this in Dad's old fishing tackle box when I was looking for something in the attic last Christmas. I think he meant it for you, but never had the chance to give it. It seems right that you should have it now. I'm not ready to come home yet, but I'm finding my way back to myself. Dr. Ellis reminds me daily of who I used to be. Audrey Sterling has been surprisingly helpful too. Turns out she's nothing like her sister or mother. The annulment papers are filed. Serafina didn't fight it. I think in her own way she's trying to find herself too. I miss you. I miss Dad. I miss who we were before I got lost trying to be someone else. Love? Gabriel, the velvet pouch contained a small, antique silver compass, clearly worn from age and use, with a simple inscription on the back. For Lillian, who always helps me find my way home. Love, Theodore. I held the compass in my palm, feeling its weight, physical and emotional. Theodore must have purchased it before his final heart attack, tucked it away for some special occasion that never came. Yet somehow now it had found its way to me through our son. A son who was finding his own way back to true north after years of drifting toward false horizons. I returned to my garden, the compass in my pocket, and continued pruning the roses Theodore had planted. Each snip of the shears felt like an act of faith, cutting away what was spent and unnecessary to make room for new growth, much like what Gabriel was doing with his life, much like what I had done by refusing to fund that honeymoon. Sometimes, I thought, the greatest acts of love require the sharpest cuts. And sometimes, the most important tables in our lives aren't the ones at grand receptions, but the ones where we gather with those who truly see us. Kitchen tables and all. Summer passed into autumn, the sweltering South Carolina heat giving way to golden days and crisp evenings. I returned to my routine, teaching my literature classes at the college, tending my garden, meeting my book club for our monthly discussion. Life resumed its comfortable rhythm, though thoughts of Gabriel were never far from my mind. We spoke regularly now, real conversations, not the stilted, transactional exchanges of recent years. He remained in Boston, having taken a position at a community hospital rather than the prestigious private practice he'd been pursuing. Less money, more medicine, he explained. More people who actually need help rather than vanity procedures. The annulment was finalized in August, a quiet legal ending to a marriage that had begun with such outsized pomp. Serafina returned to Washington, D.C. and, according to Audrey, who had become an unexpected friend, had begun working seriously with her father's foundation, showing a surprising aptitude for organization and genuine interest in their educational initiatives. As for Gabriel and Audrey, something was definitely developing there, though neither would admit it directly. They'd begun having coffee regularly, then dinners, then weekend outings to museums and parks. Just friends, Gabriel insisted when I gently probed, but I recognized the tone in his voice, the same careful, hopeful anticipation Theodore had shown when we first began dating all those years ago. On a perfect October afternoon, as I graded papers on my porch swing, my phone rang with Senator Sterling's number. "Lillian," he greeted me warmly. "How are you enjoying this magnificent fall?" "It's lovely, though perhaps not as spectacular as New England this time of year." I set aside a student's essay on Whitman. "How are things in your world, Senator Sterling?" We had developed an unlikely friendship over the months since the wedding, speaking every few weeks about books, education, and occasionally our children. He'd revealed himself to be an avid reader with a particular interest in American transcendentalism, the same philosophical movement that had inspired my great-grandfather's collection. "Business continues. Empires expand," he chuckled, the sound carrying a hint of weariness. "But I'm actually calling about a more personal matter. I'll be in Atlanta next week for a conference and thought I might drive down to South Carolina afterward. Would you be amenable to showing me Theodore's legacy? As a fellow bibliophile, I've been curious since our first conversation. The request surprised me. You'd drive all the way to South Carolina just to see some old books?" "Some old books?" He laughed, a deep, genuine laugh. "Lillian, you're speaking to someone who once flew to London specifically to view a first edition of Shakespeare's Folio. We collectors are nothing if not devoted to our obsessions." I smiled, recognizing a kindred spirit despite our different backgrounds. "Then I'd be honored to show you the collection. When should I expect you?" We settled on the following Thursday. After hanging up, I found myself looking around my home with fresh eyes, seeing the treasures it contained, not just as family heirlooms, but as pieces of literary history that still held power to impress someone like Senator Sterling. 3 days later, my doorbell rang at an unusual hour, just past 9 in the evening. I wasn't expecting visitors, and South Carolina's gentle social codes generally discouraged unannounced evening calls. When I opened the door to find Gabriel standing on my porch, a duffel bag at his feet and uncertainty in his eyes, I nearly dropped the book I was holding. "Hi, Mom," he said simply, his voice cracking slightly. "Is that kitchen table seat still available?" I pulled him into a fierce hug, feeling the familiar shape of him in my arms. My son, my only child, the living legacy of Theodore and all the crosses before him. "Always," I whispered into his shoulder. "Always." Later, after I'd settled him in his old room and brought down the peach cobbler I'd fortuitously baked that morning, we sat at the actual kitchen table, The solid oak surface marked with decades of family meals, homework sessions, and late-night conversations. "It feels strange to be back," Gabriel admitted, looking around at the kitchen Theodore had renovated. "But that still retained its early 20th century charm. Everything's the same, but I'm not." "That's how homecomings work," I said, serving him a generous portion of cobbler. "The place stays constant while we change against it, measuring our growth." He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes, something I hadn't seen consistently since before Rachel left him. Still the professor, always. I sat across from him, enjoying the simple pleasure of having my son at my table again. "So what brings you home?" "Not that you need a reason." Gabriel took a bite of cobbler, closing his eyes briefly in appreciation. "Several things, actually." He set down his fork. "First, I've accepted a position at Memorial Hospital here in South Carolina. I start in January." Joy surged through me, though I tried to keep my expression measured. "That's wonderful news, but I thought you were happy at the community hospital in Boston." "I was." "I am," he nodded. "But South Carolina needs doctors, too. And He hesitated, looking not at me but at the sturdy oak table. I realized I miss home. The real home, not the idea of it I've been running from for years. I reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "I'm glad, Gabriel. But are you sure? Boston has become important to you." A slight flush colored his cheeks. "Well, that's the second piece of news. Audrey Sterling has applied for teaching positions in the local school district." My carefully constructed containment shattered, and I could only stare at him, my teacup halfway to my lips. "She's been wanting to leave Denver, get closer to her father now that he's talking about semi-retirement." "I see," I said carefully, trying to contain my smile which threatened to split my face. "And her coming to South Carolina is related to your decision?" "We're exploring possibilities." His flush deepened, a wonderfully boyish color. "She's nothing like Serafina, Mom. She reads actual books, not just Instagram captions. She volunteers at a literacy program in Denver. She drives a 10-year-old Subaru and doesn't care what anyone thinks about it." "She sounds wonderful," I said sincerely, "and quite different from your usual type." "Necessary?" He gave a harsh, incredulous laugh. "Serafina's friends have been texting her all day. Her sister posted about the amazing villa online yesterday. Now everyone knows we're not going." "She's humiliated." "I'm sorry for her discomfort," I said carefully, neutrally. "But perhaps this is an opportunity for honesty about your financial situation. That's rich coming from you." The venom in his voice took me aback. "What do you mean?" "I met with Senator Sterling this morning." My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected Senator Sterling to speak with Gabriel so soon. "Did you?" "Theodore's legacy." Gabriel's voice dripped with bitter, wounded accusation. "First edition's worth millions. Manuscripts museums would kill for. All sitting in that modest house you've been living in, while I worked myself to the bone to build a career." I took the next exit off the highway, pulling into a rest stop parking lot. This conversation could not be conducted while driving. I turned off the engine, watching raindrops begin to speckle the windshield. "Gabriel, I never hid anything from you. You simply never shared it. You presented yourself as this humble teacher who sacrificed everything for me." His voice rose, vibrating with years of repressed guilt and misunderstanding. "All those guilt trips about remortgaging the house for my education, when the house contains enough valuable books to buy a hospital." "The collection was never meant to be sold," I explained calmly, deliberately. "It's a legacy, a trust. Your great-grandfather spent his life building it. A legacy you never bothered to share with me. Your own son." The hurt beneath his anger was finally visible, raw and painful. "I was waiting for the right time," I said softly, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass. "For you to show interest in your family history beyond what it could buy you. That's not fair, Mother, is it?" I watched the rain fall harder, blurring the world outside. "Gabriel, when was the last time you asked about my life, about your father's research, about anything related to our family that wasn't connected to your immediate needs?" "I always planned to share the collection with you," I continued gently, my voice laced with sorrow. But over the years, you made it increasingly clear that South Carolina, our home, our history, they were embarrassments to be overcome, not treasures to be preserved. So this was some kind of test? Watching me struggle financially when you were sitting on a fortune? No, Gabriel. This was me hoping my son would eventually remember what actually matters. I sighed, the sound filling the quiet car. The same hope Senator Sterling apparently holds for his daughter. Senator Sterling? Gabriel's voice turned bitter again. He showed me the prenup. Did you know about that too? I only learned of it this morning. Gabriel, why did you lie to the Sterlings about paying for the wedding yourself? The question hung between us, heavy with implication. When he finally answered, his voice lost its sharp edge, sounding suddenly young and vulnerable. Because Senator Sterling built his empire from nothing. He came from steelworkers and made himself into a legend. How could I admit that I needed my mother's help to afford the life his daughter expected? What kind of man would that make me in his eyes? The irony was so profound it almost made me weep. The kind of man he was, Gabriel. The kind of man who understands that worth isn't measured by the size of your bank account. Rain drummed on the roof of the car, creating a cocoon of white noise around our difficult, painful truths. Serafina's devastated about the honeymoon, he said finally. The anger exhausted, replaced by a hollow confusion. She thinks you did it to punish her. And what do you think? He sighed heavily, the sound of a man waking up after a long, expensive sleep. I think I've been trying so hard to belong in her world that I forgot to question if it was a world worth belonging to. Hope fluttered in my chest, fragile as a newly emerged butterfly. And now? Now everything's a mess. Her mother is talking about reevaluating the union. Serafina keeps vacillating between tears and fury, and I'm standing in the middle wondering how I got here. One compromise at a time, I said gently. One little sacrifice of authenticity after another. The silence that followed felt different. Thoughtful rather than hostile. Do you remember? He said eventually. That summer we went to the Outer Banks? When I was 12? The question surprised me with its seeming randomness. Of course. Your father was researching his book on coastal dialects. We rented that little blue cottage. We couldn't afford the fancy restaurants, so Dad grilled fresh fish every night on that rusty charcoal grill. Gabriel's voice softened with the cherished memory. And you brought all those paperbacks of classic sea adventures that we read aloud on the porch. Melville, Conrad, Stevenson, I recalled, smiling despite myself. Your father did all the character voices. That was the happiest I ever remember us being. The simple statement held such painful weight. No pretensions. No keeping up with anyone. Just us. Rain continued to fall outside, washing the world clean. We were happy, Gabriel, I affirmed. Not because of what we had, but because of who we were together. I don't think Serafina would understand that kind of happiness. The realization seemed to genuinely pain him. Last night, after you refused the money, do you know what she said? That we could still salvage the situation by taking Instagram photos at luxury hotels nearby and pretending we were in the Seychelles. That no one would know the difference. The depth of the deception shocked me anew. And how did you respond? I said I was tired of pretending. His voice cracked slightly. I don't think she's ever heard me say no before. We sat in silence again, the rain creating a gentle percussion on the car roof. Finally, Gabriel spoke again. The honeymoon's canceled for good, not just postponed. I see. I kept my voice neutral, waiting. I told Serafina I need space to think. To figure out what's real and what's performance in my life. He sounded exhausted, but clearer somehow. I'm going to stay with my friend Dr. Ellis for a few days. He's chief resident at Boston General, lives in a tiny apartment, and drives a 10-year-old Honda. The Dr. Ellis you played basketball with in medical school? Yes. I could hear the surprise in his voice that I remembered the detail. You sent him that care package when he was studying for boards, homemade cookies and coffee, I recalled. He sent such a lovely thank you note. He always said you were the mom he wished he'd had. Gabriel paused. I haven't seen much of him lately. Serafina thought he was too ordinary. The word hung in the air, its judgment now turned inside out. Well, I said carefully, ordinary has its virtues. Yes. A deep, shaky breath. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need the absolute truth. All those times you helped me financially, the tuition, the condo down payment, the wedding, did it hurt you? Were you sacrificing your own security? The question so long in coming brought tears to my eyes. No, Gabriel. Theodore's legacy may be valuable, but I never touched it. I helped you from my savings, from your father's life insurance. I was careful, but I was never in danger. And the remortgage? A small one, long since paid off. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. I may have emphasized it more than strictly necessary when you were making choices I thought unwise. A surprised laugh escaped him. The first genuine one I'd heard in too long. Manipulative. Strategic, I corrected, my own smile growing. A mother's prerogative. The rain began to ease, sunshine breaking through in dappled patches. I don't know what happens next, Gabriel admitted. With Serafina, with the Sterlings, with any of it, you don't have to know today, I assured him. Just promise me one thing. What's that? That whatever you decide, it will be the real Gabriel Cross making the choice. Not the man you thought you needed to be for Serafina or her world. Gabriel laughed ruefully. My usual type nearly bankrupted me financially and morally. He sobered instantly. Audrey sees the real me and likes that person better than the one I was pretending to be. Smart woman. She reminds me a bit of you, actually. He smiled shyly. Strong principles. No patience for pretense. I felt tears threatening and blinked them away. High praise indeed. There's one more reason I'm here. Gabriel's expression grew serious. Senator Sterling called me yesterday. Said he's coming to South Carolina next week to see Theodore's legacy. Yes, we arranged it a few days ago. I studied my son's face. Does that bother you? No, Gabriel seemed to struggle for words. It made me realize I've never properly appreciated the collection myself, my own family's legacy. I've been so busy trying to acquire new status symbols that I never valued the extraordinary heritage right in front of me. The insight, so hard-won over these painful months, filled me with quiet maternal pride. The collection has always been here, waiting for you to be ready for it. That's just it, Mom. He leaned forward earnestly. I want to understand it now, not just as valuable objects, but as part of our family story. I want to know what these books meant to great-grandfather Theodore, to Dad, to you. I want to be worthy of preserving them for the next generation. My heart swelled at the transformation before me. My son finding his way back not just to his childhood home, but to the values and legacy it represented. And there's one more thing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small blue box. I need your advice about this. I opened it to find an antique ring, a modest sapphire surrounded by tiny pearls in a vintage gold setting, nothing like the massive diamond he had given Serafina. It was Grandma Cross's, he explained. Dad gave it to me before he died, said it should go to the woman I truly loved when the time was right. He looked down, suddenly vulnerable. Do you think Audrey would prefer something more modern? Something bigger? I closed the box gently, pushing it back toward him. I think the woman who drives a 10-year-old Subaru and reads actual books will understand exactly what this ring represents. Relief washed over his face, bright and undeniable. That's what I hoped you'd say. We talked late into the night, the kitchen table serving its ancient purpose as the heart of family communion. Gabriel spoke of his journey these past months, the painful self-examination, the shedding of false values, the rediscovery of what actually mattered. I shared stories of Theodore he'd never heard, of my own struggles and triumphs, of the cross ancestors whose values had shaped our family across generations. When we finally said goodnight, the old house creaking comfortably around us, Gabriel paused at the foot of the stairs. You know what I keep thinking about? He said, his voice soft with realization. That kitchen table at the wedding. How humiliated I felt when I saw where they'd seated you. It was difficult, I acknowledged, the memory still holding a lingering ache. But now I see it differently. He shook his head slowly. They thought they were insulting you, but really they were revealing themselves. The kitchen table is where real life happens, where families share food and stories and truths. He smiled, a genuine deep smile. They accidentally put you exactly where a mother should be, at the heart of things, not the showy periphery. I blinked back tears at this beautiful reframing. That's a generous interpretation. It's the true one. He kissed my cheek, the gesture filled with warmth and respect. Good night, Mom. Thank you for keeping my place at the table, even when I didn't deserve it. As I heard his footsteps on the stairs, the familiar creaky seventh step announcing his progress, I remained in the kitchen, running my hands over the worn oak surface that had witnessed so much cross history. Tables of honor at weddings might showcase status and connection. But kitchen tables, actual kitchen tables, showcase something far more valuable: the messy, beautiful authenticity of family life, the place where we break bread, break down, and occasionally break through to deeper understanding. Gabriel had finally found his way back to the right table, and I had been here all along, keeping his place ready, knowing that true belonging isn't assigned by a wedding planner with a clipboard, but by the heart's recognition of home. 2 years passed. 2 years of profound change for all of us. Theodore's legacy had found a new purpose, with selected pieces now rotating through carefully curated public exhibitions, while the core remained preserved in our family home. No longer hidden treasures, they had become shared cultural heritage, though still under our stewardship. A bit to the left, Gabriel. The light catches it better there. My son adjusted. The display case containing my great-grandfather's correspondence with Ralph Waldo Emerson, the centerpiece of the Transcendentalism and the American Spirit. Exhibit now opening at South Carolina's Historical Society. The antique paper seemed to glow under the carefully calibrated museum lighting. Perfect, Senator Sterling confirmed, stepping back to assess the arrangement. As the exhibit's primary financial backer, he had taken a personal interest in every detail. The juxtaposition with Thoreau's manuscripts creates a wonderful dialogue between the texts. Gabriel completed his adjustment and joined us, automatically reaching for Audrey's hand. The vintage sapphire ring caught the light as their fingers intertwined, a perfect fit just as I'd predicted. They'd been married for 8 months now, in a simple ceremony in our backyard under the oak trees. 60 guests, homemade food, Theodore's old record collection providing the music. No assigned seating, just friends and family mingling freely, finding their natural places among people who genuinely cared for one another. The catalog looks beautiful. Lillian? Camilla Sterling said, joining our small group with her usual impeccable timing. Her relationship with Senator Sterling had evolved since the wedding, still married, but with a new dynamic based on hard-won honesty rather than mutual performance. She'd initially resisted the changes in her husband and younger daughter, but gradually found her own path toward greater authenticity. Thank you, Camilla. Your foundation's contribution made the publication possible. I accepted the printed exhibition catalog she offered, admiring the cover featuring one of the Emerson letters. The scholarship fund for local students is already receiving applications. She nodded, genuine pleasure animating her still perfect features. Accessibility was always Senator Sterling's passion. I'm learning to appreciate it myself. Across the room, Serafina stood in conversation with the museum director, her expertise in arts administration now professionally recognized beyond her family connections. The annulment had been a beginning rather than an ending for her, a painful but necessary step toward finding her own identity outside her mother's carefully constructed social bubble. We maintained a cordial relationship, connected through the unexpected friendship between her father and me, and through Audrey, who had reclaimed the sister bond that had withered under years of competition and comparison. Serafina still preferred Washington, D.C. to South Carolina, designer labels to vintage finds. But she had developed something previously lacking: self-awareness and genuine respect for different values. 5 minutes until the doors open, the museum coordinator announced, sending staff scurrying for final adjustments. Gabriel squeezed my arm gently. Nervous, Mom? I smiled up at my son, still handsome in his suit, but now wearing clothes that expressed rather than defined him. Not nervous, grateful. For what? Audrey asked, slipping her arm through mine on the other side. For kitchen tables, I said, drawing puzzled looks from both of them. For places that gather us together in authenticity rather than performance. Understanding dawned in Gabriel's eyes. From the kitchen table at the wedding to a museum exhibition. Quite a journey. The journey matters more than the destination, Senator Sterling commented, joining our conversation. Though I must say, this particular destination is rather splendid. The massive front doors of the museum swung open, admitting the first visitors, primarily local students and educators who had been given preview access before the general public opening. Their eager faces as they encountered these literary treasures, previously accessible only to scholars and collectors, confirmed that we had made the right decision to share rather than merely preserve. Dr. Cross, a young woman in nursing scrubs, hurried toward Gabriel, slightly out of breath. I'm so sorry I'm late. Surgery ran long. Maria, glad you could make it. Gabriel introduced his former patient to our group. Maria was my first surgery at Memorial. Now she's in nursing school, top of her class. Thanks to the Cross Sterling Scholarship, she said, her eyes bright with determination. First in my family to go to college. This program changed my life. The scholarship, jointly funded by our families after the exhibition partnership proved successful, had already supported 15 students from underprivileged backgrounds. Gabriel and Audrey administered it personally, interviewing each candidate, mentoring recipients, creating the kind of direct impact that vast fortunes in the wrong hands often failed to achieve. As the exhibition space filled with visitors, I found myself standing slightly apart, watching my son in his element, explaining a particularly significant passage to an elderly gentleman, his passion for the material evident in his animated gestures. Nearby, Audrey guided a group of middle school students, her teaching skills transforming potentially dry historical context into a living narrative that captivated even the most restless teenagers. Penny for your thoughts, Senator Sterling said, appearing at my side with 2 glasses of champagne from the refreshment table. I accepted one gratefully. Just marveling at how differently things turned out from what I feared 2 years ago, when my daughter relegated you to the kitchen table. His eyes twinkled with gentle humor. When I thought I'd lost my son to a world of empty appearances, I corrected. When I feared Theodore's legacy would end with expensive watches and country club memberships rather than books and ideas. Senator Sterling nodded thoughtfully. We each faced that moment of choice, whether to pursue substance or show. I chose wrongly for many years, built a financial empire, neglected the spiritual one. His slight grammatical stumbles, a habit that emerged when he was emotionally invested in a topic, revealed the steelworker's son beneath the polished exterior. Your son nearly made the same mistake, but found his way back, I finished. With some help from an unexpected alliance. We clinked glasses gently, this unlikely friend and I, connected not by social circles or family ties, but by shared values, discovered late yet embraced fully. Mother, Gabriel called from across the room, beckoning me toward a cluster of visitors. Professor Johnson has a question about great-grandfather's annotation practices. As I moved to join them, I caught sight of my reflection in a glass display case. Silver hair elegantly styled, at Audrey's insistence. Simple pearl earrings, Theodore's gift on our 20th anniversary, and eyes bright with purpose. Not the irrelevant mother-in-law relegated to the kitchen table, but a woman of substance honored for preserving what mattered. The canceled honeymoon that had seemed so dramatic 2 years ago now registered as merely the necessary catalyst for profound transformation. The $93,000 never spent on Seychelles luxury had instead funded the first year of the scholarship program, helping students like Maria pursue education that would ripple outward through generations. Later that evening, after the successful opening reception, our blended family gathered in my kitchen, Gabriel and Audrey. Senator Sterling and Camilla, even Serafina, who had flown in specifically for the event. The formal exhibition might have been held in the museum's elegant galleries, but the real celebration happened exactly where it should, around my kitchen table, laden with homemade food and mismatched dishes that had served the Cross family for decades. A toast, Senator Sterling proposed, raising his glass. To Lillian, who had the courage to stand firm when it would have been easier to give in. To Gabriel, I countered, raising my own glass. Who had the wisdom to find his way back to what matters? To kitchen tables, Gabriel added with a meaningful smile. Where real life happens. We clinked glasses all around, this unlikely gathering of people who had found authentic connection despite, or perhaps because of, the painful revelations that began at a grand wedding. As conversation and laughter flowed around my kitchen, I silently thanked whoever had created that wedding seating chart 2 years ago. In trying to diminish me by placing me at the kitchen table, they had inadvertently reminded me of what truly mattered and set in motion a journey that had brought my son home in every sense that counted. Sometimes, I reflected, as I passed a plate of Theodore's favorite peach cobbler, now Gabriel's specialty, made from his father's recipe, the greatest gifts come disguised as insults. And sometimes the table of honor isn't at the front of the reception hall, but in the heart of the home, where authenticity gathers and truth is served alongside love. 5 years later, my kitchen table has expanded literally and figuratively. Gabriel and Audrey added leaves to accommodate their twins, Theodore and Caroline, now 3 years old and enthusiastic if messy, participants in our Sunday family dinners. The scholarship program has grown to support 30 students annually, with Maria now serving on the selection committee after completing her nursing degree. Theodore's legacy continues its dual existence, part private family treasure, part public educational resource. Gabriel has become its passionate steward, learning from Senator Sterling about the financial structures needed to preserve cultural heritage while making it accessible to new generations. Serafina visits occasionally, bringing her son. Yes, she found her own path to motherhood through adoption, embracing a challenge her mother initially opposed but now celebrates. She still prefers 5-star hotels to guest rooms, designer labels to vintage finds, but she has developed genuine respect for different choices. Camilla Sterling has mellowed with grandparenting, discovering that sticky fingers on her silk blouses matter less than the giggles that accompany them. Senator Sterling semi-retired to spend more time on their foundation work and rare book acquisitions, often consulting with me on potential additions to both our collections. As for me, I still teach, though on a reduced schedule. My students now include scholarship recipients who bring fresh perspectives to the transcendentalist texts my great-grandfather cherished. On campus, they call me Professor Kitchen Table, a nickname that began as a student's misheard comment but stuck, because it somehow captures my teaching, philosophy perfectly. The sapphire ring that once belonged to Grandma Cross now has a companion piece. A simple gold band Gabriel wears with more pride than he ever showed in his expensive watches. When people compliment it, he often shares the story of 2 weddings, the lavish affair where appearances reigned, and the backyard ceremony where authenticity prevailed. Sometimes, when the twins are asleep and the house grows quiet, Gabriel and I sit at the kitchen table with books from the collection, reading passages aloud, just as Theodore and I once did. Thoreau's words resonate across generations. Rather than love, then money, then fame, give me truth. Truth. Sometimes painful, often transformative, always necessary. The truth that came to light when a mother was seated at the kitchen table during her son's wedding. The truth that emerged when a $93,000 honeymoon was canceled. The truth that ultimately brought a family back to what matters. Not the table we're assigned, but the table we choose. Not the price of the journey, but its purpose. Not the appearance of wealth, but the richness of connection. I run my hand along the worn oak surface of my kitchen table, feeling the small nicks and scratches that mark decades of family history. Each imperfection tells a story. Holiday celebrations, heated discussions, quiet grief, shared joy. This table has witnessed it all, sturdy and steadfast, gathering us together through life's ebbs and flows. In the end, there is no higher honor than a place at such a table. A truth worth remembering, whether in modest South Carolina homes or DC mansions. A truth I'm grateful my son finally discovered, bringing our family full circle back to where we belong. Together, authentic at the kitchen table.